Good morning. Happy Sunday, everybody. I'll make something short and sweet as I possibly could. I really wanted to jump on and talk about a few things. The first one being the runoff election here in Brookhaven. As you know, I didn't win November 7th, and it's going into a runoff. And a lot of my disappointment initially was not because I didn't win, but because of the low voter turnout. No one came to vote it, and a lot of times in runoffs, it's even less. People don't vote in local elections for some reason, and the local elections is really what impacts you and impacts your livelihood from day to day. So the runoff election is December 5th. And so I really need you guys to do your research. That's next week, next Tuesday. I need you to do your research. It's extremely important to go out and vote. Interestingly enough, when I had actually decided to run for mayor of Brookhaven, it was because of the lack of experience and leadership in government that one of the candidates had. And I felt like it was my duty to run because I had that experience, and that person's track record of failing organizations and their lack of familiarity with the true needs of Brookhaven residents and their false assumptions of what those needs are, it will be very dangerous to the city of Brookhaven. So there is a candidate that I'm going to support because obviously I have to vote just as you do. Um, and so I knew that I would be the most skilled, but because I didn't win, you gotta go with the person that you feel is still going to do the best job. And so I implore you guys to continue to dig deep and really research the two candidates, John Park and Lauren Kiefer, because one of those candidates, they have continued to fail organizations that they were part of that really didn't have anything to do with government. They don't have government experience. They have not lived in Brookhaven that long. They don't really know what the true needs of Brookhaven residents are. So I implore you to really look deep into that. I kind of want to liken this runoff to the 2016 presidential election. You know, everyone felt like they would rather vote for a person with no experience to battle a system that has remained unfavorable to many black and brown people, that's remained unfavorable to a system that didn't support the ideas and beliefs of people that look like us. And that candidate won, and that candidate failed the country and has always hated people that look like myself and my children, which allowed proud others to stand on their hate for us, which amplified the continued murders of black people in this country. But you know, I'm going a little left with that. So I do want you to do your research. I don't want you to vote for people just because they don't have experience and they've never shown you or proven to you that they're capable to do the job. Don't do that again. The city of Brookhaven, we can't have anyone in place that is not capable of knowing how to do the job. Later this week, I'll be transparent and let you all know who I will be supporting. But I do want you to go vote on December 5th. Go vote for Mayor Brookhaven. It is your civic duty, especially to those who didn't have a right to vote until 58 years ago. So this one is on you, and it's your responsibility. When we turn up in large numbers, our voices are heard. To give you a little background, a little history lesson, in the 1800s, when the Constitution was spelled out, how a person could be voted for, there was no explanation on who could actually vote, which was left up to the states, which we know didn't want black people, women, nor other disadvantaged groups of people to vote. So while no longer explicitly excluded, voter suppression is still a problem. And so some politicians try to win by making it harder for certain populations and demographics to vote, which was obvious in this last election. These politicians, they use strategies such as reducing polling locations in predominantly African American and Latin neighborhoods, or only have polling locations that are open during business hours, which many disenfranchised populations are working and unable to take time off. It was not until the 15th Amendment was passed in 1869 that black men were allowed to vote. But even so, many would-be voters faced with artificial hurdles like poll tax, literacy tests, and other measures that were meant to discourage them from exercising their right to vote. This will continue until the 24th Amendment in 1964, which eliminated the poll tax, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, quote unquote, ended Jim Crow laws. Women were denied the right to vote until the 1920s, when the long efforts of women's suffrage movement resulted in the 19th Amendment. Black women weren't allowed to vote then. With these amendments being removed, the previous barriers to voting, particularly amongst sex and race, theoretically all Americans over the age of 21 had the right to vote in the 1960s. Later in 1971, the American voting age was lowered to the age of 18, which built on the idea that if a person can serve in the military and serve their country, they should be allowed to vote. Your vote matters because your vote is not just one vote in a sea of millions. It actually does make a difference. And I want you to consider a couple of elections in history of this country. In 2000, Al Gore, he narrowly lost the Electoral College vote against George Bush. The election came down to a recount in Florida, where Bush had won the popular vote by a small margin that triggered an automatic recount and a Supreme Court case. In the end, Bush won Florida by 0.009% of the votes in the state, or 537 votes. Had 600 more pro-Gore voters actually voted, we would have had a different president. Excuse me. We would have had an entirely different president that could have possibly served from the year 2000 through 2008. More recently, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 by securing a close electoral college win. Although the election did not come down to a handful of votes in one state, Trump's votes in the electoral college decided a tight race. Clinton had won the national popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. But the concentration of Trump voters in key districts in swing states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan helped to seal excuse me. It helped to seal enough electoral votes to win the presidency. While presidential or other national elections usually get significant voter turnout, as I stated earlier, local elections do not, and it's typically decided by a much smaller group of people. Here in Brookhaven, on election day, only 5,000 voters turned out on election day. Excuse me. And 2,000 voters came out for early voting.